The Realty Debate with Manisha Natarajan, powered by Reliance Home Finance.
Recently, an observation was made by the Supreme Court that housing projects must get environment clearance before work can start. And this news made it to the front page of national dailies. This was simply an observation made on a case belonging to Tamil Nadu, where a group of 7 developers had started construction without approvals, environment approvals to be precise. This was not a blanket observation on the business of real estate in India. Developers across the country by law cannot begin work or construction work without environment clearances. But as always, such a headline news was met with a lot of skepticism by the common man, who believes that builders often flout green norms. Builders, on the other hand, say that the environment clearance process is cumbersome, time-consuming, and, look at the figure, escalates the cost of your house by 30% or so. And despite promises by the NDA government, this still remains a big bone of contention. Today on the Realty Debate, we thrash out the green processes for India's real estate sector. Do we have enough checks and balances in place, or do we have too many? Joining me today on the debate, let me bring you the names first. We've got Gitambar Anand joining us. He's the head CMD of ATS Infrastructure Limited and President CREDAI. Also, Tanmay Tathagat, Director, Environmental Design Solutions. Dr. Vandana Shiva, Environmental Activist. Mayur Shah, Managing Director, Marathon Group. Ajit Kumar Chodia from Chennai, Managing Director, Olympia Infratech Private Limited. And President CREDAI, Chennai. Ajit, I'm going to start with you because we are basing this on that big news, on an observation by the Supreme Court. Literally, it made it to the headlines, making people believe that maybe builders and developers do not take environmental clearances before starting to build. How misplaced is this idea?
If you see, it has got to be region specific. It cannot be a generalized statement that developers don't take environment clearance. If you look at Tamil Nadu, we have had long periods when this particular committee, the SCIIA itself, was not constituted. And like you yourself said, the delay in getting the environment clearance adds to the cost. Thereafter, there have been also some ambiguities with respect to deemed approvals. There is also an ambiguity with respect to the 20,000 square meter. You could start the construction, you could not start the construction, or you need to get approval only after you cross 20,000. So it is a situation which has been compounded by multiple issues. More so, it has been because of the delay in getting the environment clearances. The developers would have been compelled to start construction a little early.
Is that so? All right, Gitambar, so let me come back to a little away from that case. What is the situation today? Does every building, house or flat, before it's built, need an environment clearance in the country, especially in the metros? Or is there a certain size above which you need a clearance?
So, no. So let me first put the entire discussion in perspective. Every development above 20,000 square meters needs an environment clearance in the country, and the developer community is getting it. So let me go back, Manisha, when the center stopped giving clearances and empowered the states by setting up these environment assessment committees in the state itself.
Okay.
So the procedure was such that the state would nominate a 3-member committee, and that committee, the names of that committee would be sent to the central government MOEF. The central government would okay that file and say, fine, you can go ahead and form a committee with these 3 names.
Okay.
And that file would then become, that okay would become a gazette and be sent back to the state. Now this entire procedure would take a minimum of a year and a half. In case in the interim, suppose one of the members, they were passed away or probably didn't want to continue, or something happened, was not medically fit to continue, then the entire process had to be repeated, which would mean another year and a half. So what is happening now is that various states do have these committees, but in many states, the committees either are in a state of transition where the members are being changed, So this entire process, like I said, takes a year and a half. So what happened in Chennai was, the developer bought his land, he got his plans sanctioned from the municipal bodies in the right way. All permissions were taken, and then he applied for environment clearance to the State Environment Impact Assessment Committee,
Right.
which was not existent. A year happened, a year and a half happened. So then, they went back to the corporation and said, can we start the work, because we don't know when this is going to be formed, this committee. So I believe, from what I hear, is that the municipal corporation, the sanctioning authority, told them, yes, you go ahead with your construction, and when this committee is formed, you can apply for your clearances again at that point in time. This is what happened over there, but this is not true. It's not true to say that developers are starting work without requisite environmental clearances. This is absolutely wrong. Let me give you another thing. The central government recently, the MOEF, has tweaked this 20,000 square feet for, if you're making a factory, this doesn't have to be, the limit is not 20,000 square meters, it is now 150,000 square meters. If you're making a factory. If you're making a hospital, it is exempt. Again, it's 150,000. So various hotels, you don't have to go for it. But for making a residential complex, factory is exempt up to 150,000. But for making a residential complex, if it is more than 20,000 square meters, it has that, you have to go back to this committee and take this permission.
Okay.
What we have represented is
hold your thought.
that we know what is required.
We'll come to what is it that you would like? I mean, what is it that will make your business easier to do? I think, let me get a reaction on this very, very critical fact. Vandana, Shiva, you're with us. The whole change which has happened, MOEF last year, January, has changed the norms for industry for Make in India, saying that, look, not 20,000 square meter, but 150,000 square meter. However, for housing, it hasn't been changed, though High Court has observed that housing is a non-polluting industry. Is there fairness in this process, or do you think that there isn't fairness?
Well, I think the first thing is, in terms of the Tamil Nadu builders, the point was that the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, had actually fined the builders, and then the Supreme Court had put a bench, and the observation of the Supreme Court now under Justice Thakur was that was a mistake. You cannot put a stay to allow activities that have harm for the environment and have impact on people. And the language used was pollution, which is too narrow a language when we're talking about environmental impact. The main point is this: a factory, if it's built in a drainage system, will cause the same damage. And the Chennai floods are there for us as a clear lesson that many of these places were factories, industrial zones, of course, new high-rise buildings for residences. And I think everything we do in India on town planning should be informed by the lessons we should learn from the Chennai floods. Our most eminent town planner, architect K.T. Ravindran has called it the geographies of disaster. 1.5 illegal structures, illegal in the sense they didn't have the environmental clearances, buried 300 water bodies. If you've lived in the Deccan, you've lived in Karnataka, and I have, I was at the Bangalore Institute of Science and Institute of Management, or in Tamil Nadu or Andhra, this Deccan area gets its water through these amazing systems of interlinked tank, a most important hydrological system. Now, along the coast, with the drainage system narrowing down into Chennai, blocking that drainage and preventing the absorption of water in times of extreme floods, which we'll have more of with the climate change, you're making a recipe for disaster. I think the government definitely needs to move beyond fragmented planning. We have to have integrated planning, and we can't just have one kind of building subjected to law and other kinds not, if they both do the damage. But more importantly, now that we are in the era of so-called smart cities, let's be ecologically smart. Let's not create disasters like Chennai, which cost the public 50,000 to a lakh crores of damages. And we are seeing this more and more. I am particularly happy that my beloved Dehradun, my hometown, my birthplace, did not make it in the current proposal of a smart city because they're going to chop down the watershed, the catchment zone of the river Asan and the last green lung. So we need to be thinking much more about what does it do to water systems and hydrological systems, recharge as well as drainage. What does it do to increasing levels of automobile
All right,
flow?
Vandana Shiva.
All of these are vital, and I think the life of the people comes before any particular sector's margin of profits.
Okay, so I get that point, larger point, but I think the big takeaway is on the Chennai case, Vandana Shiva, your point is that the NGT had already stayed the construction and there was no reason to actually do away with it. Tanmay Tathagat, do you believe that in this case, you know, it's not okay to just say we got environmental clearances were stuck? That's a larger problem which the industry needs a resolution to, but it was full of fraud and risk to start the project by just clearances by the municipal body.
That's absolutely right. That and Ajit's answer says that they really knew the risks they were taking. It is a problem where any clearance is not taken before construction, but especially with the environmental case, because there are many things that the environmental regulations require you to do that cannot be done after construction is started. So there is no retrospective way to address such problems. So in no case that rule or norm can be flouted.
Okay.
At the same time, there has to be a mechanism that ensures that the time which is given for clearance, which any developer or any project will take into account in planning their processes, including their commitment to the buyers,
Right.
are met.
Okay. So the time of approval is really critical. Mayur Shah, come in here. I mean, we're discussing the Supreme Court observation in the Chennai case where the developers, where it observed that this was not the right way to go ahead with development without environmental clearances. Wait out for us. I mean, projects do require anything above 20,000 square meters does require an environmental clearance. Is it a practice? Is it more a norm rather than exception that because clearances take so long, more often than not, developers actually have no other choice but to start work without getting the clearances?
No, not at all. I think in Mumbai or MMR region where we are operating, hardly anyone will ever start getting a prior environmental clearance. This was a very exceptional case which I think the Supreme Court was addressing, and where the committees are sometimes not sitting for 1.5 years and all, and the state government takes that call. Because if you, Manisha, strictly speaking, during construction, there is hardly any pollution happening. As a matter of fact, this entire environmental clearance was drafted for an industrial kind of an act, because it's have a word terminology like consent to operate, consent to establish. These are not really a standard construction project kind of a terms. But I think I'll just leave aside there that particular point, that construction projects were ad hocly added into this environmental clearance, are not giving enough thought into it. That is what my opinion is. But however, prior environmental clearances are taken by all the developers, and we really require a very speedy environmental clearance system. The Act says it is not more than 104 days at any point of time. So after submitting all EMP program, environmental impact study, all those things which are required and which are already submitted to the committee, if 104 days have gone or 1.5 years have gone, there must be some remedy available to a developer or a constructor to do something on the projects.
Okay, fair enough. Tanmay, have you studied the kind of clearances which developers are supposed to follow before they get the clearance? Where is the gap? I mean, why are there blockages? Are developers not doing their part, or is it really the way Mr. Gitambar Anand laid it out for us that, there's a 3-member committee, they have to clear it, then it comes to the MOEF, it goes back. The process itself is so cumbersome. What are the big blockages according to you, and how can it be? How can they be resolved?
The process that he talked about was for appointing the committee. So that is a case that's not a norm. So once a committee is there, the process is fairly straightforward. Nowadays, you're required for a large project to first get the basic terms of your study. So you're supposed to go and get an approval of this is my site, this is my project, and they give you the terms of reference that these are the environmental parameters that you need to analyze for a certain period of time, which can be from 3 months to 6 months to a year sometimes, depending on the kind of site and the project that you need to evaluate.
And these are all laid out at every state level?
Yes, well, that's the process. So the committee is supposed to tell the project proponent that these are the things that are critical for your project. You get this data, get this information, process and come back to us, including at that point of time, the environmental impact of the project, what are the remediation measures, what are the resources that are being committed to take care of all the problems, as well as the overall impact of the project in a larger radius. Say they look at a 10-kilometer radius for the impact of a construction project even, which is all it's laid out very well. The problem is that within the structure of this process, the states are supposed to manage all of this. And there is a huge variation in how a committee in one state looks at it versus another one. What are the specific requirements that they lay out? Because the project and the whole legal process does not say there is a specific remedy for every action, right? This is left up to the technical committee to evaluate. So sometimes for the same project, you'll have a very different requirement from another one. So in a nutshell, you do have to go through the process. The committee looks at it and they makes a recommendation that the project be approved or not approved. Okay. It's then sent to the government for the final signature. So the committee itself is a fairly technical and rigorous committee. It is made of hydrogeologists, people who are from the landscape part, people who look at the overall watershed.
So does it need to come to the center? Again?
No, it does not.
It's a question.
It does not need to come to the center unless it is a specific project where the environmental committee feels that it needs to refer it to the center. Otherwise, it's all supposed to be taken care at the state level. So technically, if the committees meet regularly, if the process is done, it does not take more than 3 to 6 months to do this. It's still not within 100 days, but it does take 3 to 6 months. But in many states and many cities where there are a number of projects or more and the committees are in transition, you see these delays. So for this reason, in the last year, the MOEF had come out with prescriptive measures, which are one way of addressing this. Because you know the construction project type, you can come up with a list of 30 things, 40 things, or 100 things and say that as long as you satisfy us that you are doing all of these, you can go ahead and do the process in a shortened application. I think that is what one of the other cases where there is a stay and the ruling is that you cannot actually do a prescriptive list. This has to be seen on a project by project basis.
Okay, Mr. Chodia, would you agree with Tanmay Tathagat that rather than make you go through technical committees, why not have a list of maybe 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 criteria which then the developers undertake to actually observe and follow? What is the solution according to you of this entire rigmarole of delays on environment clearances?
Madam, if we really go through the environment clearances which have been given by a particular authority, if you go through about 100 approvals which have been given, almost all are mechanical, almost cut, copy and paste. That is the situation today. In spite of that, if each and every project proponent has to make an application, wait for this particular process to go, whether they are, see, again he said the terms of reference today, it is only if it is in excess of 150,000 square meter that the TOR needs to be set, and then you need to go to a second stage. But majority of the projects which come for EC are less than 150,000 square meter. And for that, we just don't see any reason, because 90% of the conditions which are there, I would say why 99% of the conditions which are there are cut, copy and paste. They are exactly similar. The wordings could be a little bit here and there varying it. There is no difference more so after the Kasturi Rangan committee's recommendation which is there. So almost all the parameters which are there are standard. So if that is the case, if this were to be made as a part of the bylaws, you can do away with the environment clearance. I fully agree with Mayur when he said when an industry 15 lakh square feet of 150,000 square meter of industrial construction does not require prior EC. Why is it that in housing construction needs to be required?
Okay.
If an institution has absolutely without any cap does not require a prior environment clearance, why is it that in housing needs to be required? We are part of the local planning. The areas are planned areas. There is a water supply, drainage. The state government has prepared a scheme. If it is a 500 acre, 1000 acre new township, we can understand that there are a lot of issues which are there. If not, everything is supposed to be within the control of the state government. How is it that an individual property, how can I change the contours of the land which I have?
Okay.
If there is water supply, water supply is
Hold
there.
that thought there. We've completely run out of time on this segment. We have to come back, gentlemen. But how can developers change the contour of the land? I think
They do all the time.
if the developer is not conscious or an industry is not conscious, it's not just about construction or housing, it's not about industry. I think anybody who's not conscious can change the contours of the land in a big way. We'll come back. This debate is extremely interesting. Do we have too many checks and balances when it comes to environmental clearances for real estate, or do we have too little? We've established that right now we may have checks and balances which are the right amount, but the fact of the matter is that they're just taking too long. It's harming both the developers and the homeowner, where the costs are getting escalated. But what is the other way to actually balance out both preserving our nature and environment with development? This is an extremely important debate. We'll be back in just a moment.